Alright, this is a lesson on solving linear systems using substitution, and if you have your purple packet, this is actually numbers 5 and 6 on page 8. So I know we've done them already, but this is for you to kind of go back and look through them again or try them again if you need to. Alright, so step 1 of solving a linear system using substitution is to find a variable that's already isolated. So remember, we're looking for either x equals or y equals. So when we look at our first equation here, we have negative 2x plus 5y equals 8. So that's obviously not it. Then we have y equals negative 3x plus 22. Well, that one says y equals, right? So my y is isolated there, which means this negative 3x plus 22, that's my blob. So remember, we want to circle or box, or I usually put a cloud around the blob, okay? Now what we need to do is we need to take that blob and we need to plug it into the other equation. So I always draw myself an arrow. Since this says y equals, I draw myself an arrow to the y because I know that that's where I need to plug this in. Okay? I know it seems silly, right? A cloud and an arrow and all this other crazy stuff, but I promise that it will help in the long run. Okay? Now, what we need to do is I want to take that and substitute it in there, which means the rest of my equation is not going to change. I'm going to rewrite negative 2x plus 5, and instead of y, remember we put those big parentheses, equals 8. I always take a second and just make sure, okay, is that the right equation? Negative 2x plus 5y equals 8. And instead of y, I'm going to plug in my blob. So negative 3x plus 22. Now when I look, I have an x here, and I have an x inside these parentheses. I don't have a y anymore. Well, that's the point, right? I want to be able to solve this equation, and I can't do that if I have an x and a y. So I take out y, and I put in this blob, this expression, that has an x in it so that I can solve. All right, hopefully from here you guys can see, oh, all right, I'm going to distribute. So now I have negative 2x minus 15x plus 110 equals 8. So after here we had to distribute. And once we distribute that 5 inside, hopefully you guys can see we have some like terms. We have a negative 2x and a negative 15x. So after we distribute, we're going to combine like terms. CLT, combine like terms. So we get negative 17x plus 110 equals 8. And then from here, you guys have mastered solving two-step equations, right? So subtract that 110 from both sides. Negative 17x is equal to negative 102. And we can divide by negative 17. And we get x equals 6. Cool. Let's move that down so you can see, right? X equals 6. Well, now we're not done though, right? Remember, a solution to a linear system is always a coordinate point. It's always an ordered pair. So I'm actually going to go down to this space here where I'm supposed to write my solution, and I'm going to remind myself it's always x comma y. Well, I just found the x coordinate. So I'm going to put my parentheses and my comma, and I'm going to put the 6 in the spot for the x, because I know that that's where that's got to go. But now the problem is I need to find y, right? So let's go back up to our top here and see if we can figure out how we're supposed to find y. Well, don't we have an equation that has the y already isolated? Y equals negative 3x plus 22. That's where we got our blob from, right? That means I can take my x value that I found and plug it into my blob. All right, so I'm going to do this in a different color so we can kind of see what's going on here. But y equals negative 3x plus 22. Right? That was my blob equation. Well, now I know what x is, so let's plug it in. Let's substitute, right? Negative 3x plus 22. So we're taking out the x and we're putting in the value that we know it is. We know it's 6. So then we get y equals negative 18 plus 22, and we get y equals 4. So that's the other half of my solution. I can go down here now and I can put the 4 in for the y. That's my solution. But remember, we're not done, right? We always have to check our answer and make sure that we got this right. So I'm going to go over to the side here Okay, and I'm going to write check 1. I'm going to check my first equation. Alright, so my first equation was negative 2x plus 5y equals 8. So I'm going to take out my x and my y, and I'm going to plug in these values that we just found for x and y. So negative 2 plus 5y equals 8. And hopefully you guys have written down already. Our x value we found was 6, and the y value that we found was 4. So let's see if this actually works. Negative 2 times 6 is negative 12. 5 times 4 is 20. Negative 12 plus 20 is 8. 8 equals 8. Cool. I know I got it right for my first equation. Now I want to double check my second equation also. So I'm going to write check 2. My second equation is y equals negative 3x plus 22. Make sure when you're checking your equations that you're writing that original equation, all right, because you don't want to start mixing up the two equations and having all that crazy stuff happen. So now let's do check 2. We've got our y value we found was 4, negative 3, our x value was 6, plus 22. So 4 equals negative 18 plus 22. So 4 equals 4, we are good. All right, I know it seems silly to check it, but I promise you, you will know with confidence then when you turn in your quizzes and your tests that you got 100% if you check your answers. Use your calculator, all right? The biggest thing that I always notice with you guys is that we don't like to use our calculators, and so then we get these things wrong. And don't just magically make it say 4 equals 4. Show me those steps, all right? Show me that negative 3 times 6 is negative 18, and then do negative 18 plus 22 and get your 4. Don't just plug it in your calculator, okay? So look at all that work. I know it's a lot. It's a lot of steps we've got to follow through with, but I know that you guys can do it, all right? As you're watching this, don't forget you can pause, you can rewind, you can go back, okay? But that is number 5 on page 8. So let's take a look really quickly at number 6 on page 8. So this one is a little different, right? But not that much. We still need to look for a variable that's isolated. So we want either to say x equals or y equals. So for this one, our first equation is x equals 2y minus 15. Our second equation is 4x plus 2y equals 0. All right, well, the first one says x equals. On question number 5, it said y equals. It doesn't matter. It can be either one, all right? Since it says x equals, that means I'm going to have a blob right here. 2y minus 15 is my blob. Now this is where students can get messed up a little bit. It says x equals. That means we want to make sure we're plugging it in for x. So draw yourself an arrow. It's going to go in for x, not for y. It says x equals 2y minus 15. So we are going to take out that x and we're going to put in this expression, this blob that has a y. Okay, so let's rewrite our second equation. It's normally 4x plus 2y equals 0. I know you guys think I'm silly for wasting time and like pausing for a second, but I really do think that this is going to be the best way for you guys to do it. Put those big parentheses and take a step out and make sure this works. 4x plus 2y equals 0. That's this equation right here. And instead of x, I'm going to plug in my blob. I'm going to plug in 2y minus 15. Okay. Now when we look, ooh, this equation only has y's. That means I can solve this now. All right, and if we think back to the question we just did, the first thing we do after we plug in the blob is we're going to distribute. So distribute that 4 inside. And we get 8y minus 60 plus 2y equals 0. All right, after we distribute, we need to combine like terms. Remember, like terms mean that they're on the same side. All right, if they are on the same side, I don't use any inverse operations to put them together. I just need to add. So I have an 8y and a 2y. If I put those together, I get 10y minus 60 equals 0. Now it's just a two-step equation like we've been doing since the beginning of the year. All right, so we add our 60, Cancel that. We get 10y equals 60. Divide by 10. And we get y equals 6. Alright, and then again, if I were you guys, I would go down to where it says my solution part here. Let's remind ourselves it's got to be x comma y. And I found my y value first. So I'm going to put my parentheses for my ordered pair, and my y value is 6. Okay. Then I have to remember, how do I figure out my other variable, right? I plugged in a blob, and then I solved, and I distributed, I combined like terms, got a y value by itself. Now I need to figure out how to get x. So let's look at our equations again and remind ourselves that our blob said x equals 2y minus 15, right? Always go back to your blob equation. It's much easier, all right? Well, okay, I know what y is now. X equals 2y minus 15. So I take out that y and I'm going to plug in 6. So x equals 12 minus 15. X is equal to negative 3. Okay, so I can move down and I can put this in the x coordinate of my point, and now I just need to check my solution and make sure I got it right. Alright, so let's go over to this side here, and I'm going to write check 1, and I'm going to check it in my first equation. So my first equation is x equals 2y minus 15. So the x value I got was negative 3. My y value was 6. And we can just make sure that we are good here. Negative 3 equals negative 3. Cool. Then it's really more important in this case for that second equation, right? So let's do our second check. Check 2 is 4x plus 2y equals 0 is my original equation. And I'm going to take out x and y and plug in my new values here. So the x value I found was negative 3. The y value I found was 6. So I have negative 12 plus 12 equals 0. I got 0 equals 0. That's awesome. I know I got it correct. Make sure that your answer, your solution, is written as an ordered pair and that they're in the right order. Make sure you've got those checks. Okay, if you are still having trouble with this, you've got to get into the MRC or come see me or Mrs. Jennis outside of class. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.